At this point, we will get into that conversation on the project reviews and Nigerian investment atmosphere going into the new year. And our guest for this is Uche Orji, Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of the Nigeria Sovereign Investment Authority. Good morning, Uche Orji, and thank you for joining us on the morning show.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Yes, good morning. Good to have you. Well, quickly, this morning we've been talking a lot about COVID-19 and the search for vaccines, hope, and what Nigeria should do. But I would like to ask you, how has the COVID-19 pandemic affected NSIA's investment, both locally and internationally, given the fact that there has been so much talk about negative interest rates? What has been the impact on your investment, and how have you been able to navigate that?
Well, thank you. Thank you. I mean, COVID-19 is the investment theme of 2020. You know, whether you plan for it or not, it's here. And it's had its impact. On balance for us, the year is ending quite well. From a performance standpoint, despite the negative and the low interest rate environment. But let me deal with some of the issues, maybe about 3 or 4 points I want to make about the impact. First is on the domestic impact. It's been quite disruptive. It's affected some of the projects that we're working on the Nigeria Infrastructure Fund, which we manage. So there's been delays in construction, delays in commissioning, delays in logistics. So we may have lost a few months on some of those projects. And specifically, I speak to the PIDF projects that we're handling, Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, Second Niger Bridge, and Abuja-Kano Road. Those have been affected by the lockdowns, the restriction of movements on interstate travels. All of that had a big impact on the domestic investment. Internationally, it's forced a significant response by both the monetary and fiscal policy instruments and the authorities, especially central banks. So there's been a huge influx of liquidity. And you see that in Nigeria as well, where investments in treasury bills are now incredibly low. You'll be lucky if you get 1% investing in Nigeria treasury bills. Last year, it was about 13%. So that has forced interest rates down across the world. In Europe, on balance, it's negative interest rates. In the United States, it's zero almost. So it's been challenging. But the good news, though, and this is the third impact I want to speak to, is that this has led to a significant improvement in the value of other assets. So our equity investments have done very well. Equity prices are higher, both locally and internationally. So that has been good for us. It's also led to volatility. And if you're an investor or a trader, volatility is good. Volatility is a time when you can actually make some decent returns. So on balance, the year for us has been fairly good. Touch wood, it's not over. It's 3 weeks to the end of the year, but I think we are on track to report very decent numbers because we have seen benefits coming through our private equity investments, our public equities investments, our investments in public equities in China, in the United States, even in Europe, have all on balance done very well. But that has only been in the last 3 to 4 months when we've seen a big rally in the markets as people started to feel more optimistic. So the year is ending, in my opinion, fairly well, despite all the disruptions we have seen.
Well, that's nice. A nice positive note. And also on more positive news, the federal government is creating a 15 trillion naira... I'm sorry, I'm a bit distracted. The federal government is creating, through the NSIA, Africa Finance Corporation and CBN, a 15 trillion naira infrastructure fund. Can you tell us more about that? Because obviously our infrastructure deficit is huge. What are the areas of focus? How will it be created? What's the program?
Sure. So you're speaking to the Infraco that's been led by the central bank, into which the NSIA and the AFC are investors. So it is quite fascinating. What I love about all the schemes, as NIF, there's Infraco, is that we've all come to the following 4 realizations. Number 1, the infrastructure deficit needs to be addressed. Number 2, the government does not have enough resources to address it. And number 3, we must come out with creative ways to actually address these infrastructure challenges. 15 trillion naira from what it's the objective of the Infraco Fund, and the central bank will give a bit more detail because they're leading the Infraco. But I'll speak to the following three things also about how I believe the Infraco will address the deficit structure, but also the efforts we are making, including the NIF, and all of this are all coming together to address these challenges we'll address. And number one, we need to turn infrastructure into investable assets and assets that are more of an economic corridor, as opposed to just you build a road, you leave it, you don't monetize it. So these programs will turn infrastructure assets today that we believe are largely wasted into investable products. So you take a road, for example, and I speak to the road that we're building in Lagos Ibadan, and I keep using that as an example because that's what most people can relate to. That is a phenomenal asset that has real revenue potential. From tolling to concession rights to right-of-way monetization to media rights, all of that are possible, but you need to build the road properly, operate it properly, and make people pay for it. The same thing is going to happen to Abuja-Kano Road, which we are funding through the PIDF. All of this will be monetizable. Now, the idea is to package these projects as investment entities and offer them to investors. And if I look at Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, quite frankly, I did a tour of it about 3 weeks ago. I drove the entire length of the road and stopped in many places to look at the realizable opportunities. I could see an incredibly profitable project, but it's just been allowed to waste. So the essence of this is to turn infrastructure into investable assets. Pension funds will invest, NSIA will invest, every entity in this actually open for also individuals to invest, because we believe these are all profitable projects. It will address rail. Rail system is just not there. You're not going to make enough money with a rail system charging fares. You're going to make money if you move cargo on the rail, but also turn the rail right-of-way into an economic corridor. These are things that will be structured at SPVs and made investable. Bonds will be issued around those projects, and people will invest if the terms are right for them. This is how we intend to look at infrastructure across the country. It's not just a social investment. It is actually an economic and a financial and a commercial investment.
This sounds like music to my ear. I like what I'm hearing. And we've seen some of the work. I keep commending the great Sukuk work, the Sukuk bond work. I mean, I traveled on that Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, not Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, Shagamu-Benin Expressway, and I can give testament to that road based on the Sukuk bond. But I want to ask you about some projects going on currently. The second Niger Bridge, where are we as regards that? I also want to talk about, pension funds, because you said, the pension funds can invest this. That was music to my ear. But I'm like, if the governors have their way in what they want to do, the 11.4 trillion they want to collect out of, and not 17 trillion has been touted everywhere, because the pension fund is not up to 17, it's 11.4 trillion. If the governors have their way, then there'll be nothing left for this investment. Serap has been talking about this. What's your take on this very contentious issue?
I think sometimes it is best to inquire before you advocate. And here's what I mean by that. Okay. You need to understand what the scheme is. First of all, there is no attempt to grab pension funds. None, please. When these projects were being developed and designed, we had Pension Commission in the room. We had a representative of the PFAs in the room. We had InfraCredit, which is a company set up by the NSIA and later with AFC and Infraco as investors, Infraco Africa owned by the UK PIDG as investors. They were all in the room. We all sat down and said, how do we make infrastructure investable? So I think point number one is to realize that this was not done in isolation. Yes, the initial idea was championed by the governors during an NSIA presentation in November last year, but a technical committee was set up with all of these people as members, including the Central Bank and the Ministry of Finance, the DMO, everybody was in the room. So this was the outcome, which is let's turn infrastructure into investable assets. Number two, it is the option of pension funds, the sovereign wealth fund, everybody who wants to invest. It is about making this investment. And today, we talk about a negative or a low interest rate environment. If you are running a pension fund, this will be an interesting investment outlet. If you have a route that delivers for you 10, 15, 20, 25% returns, it is better than sticking your money in treasury bills earning less than 1%. So I need you to understand that this is actually an investment opportunity and not an attempt to raid or grab the pension fund. So like I said, this is how the program is being designed. And these are all still being talked about and worked on. None of these things are operational yet. There's a lot of consultation that needs to be done. There's a lot of structuring that still needs to be done. We are still a little bit far away from real implementation. But this is about turning infrastructure into investment opportunities for both the NSIA and the pension funds. If it does not work for the NSIA will not invest. And I will assume that pension fund managers and administrators will not invest if it does not work for them. So I think it is important to listen to the overall story. And by the way, this is not out of place internationally. If you look at pension funds all over the world, infrastructure is an asset class that they invest in. So this is what we're trying to accomplish here.
Well, still on these pension funds, the National Union of Pensioners raised very serious concern to say that, look, these funds belong to them, right? Because it's part of a contributory scheme. Mm-hmm. And if there is any investment, they will expect returns. But the major concern is that even if, there is that investment, what is the guarantee that there will be returns in the short to medium term, considering the plight of pensioners in Nigeria? And then, of course, SERAP is talking about accountability. SERAP is saying, look, the governors should not even get involved at all, whether they are leveraging or they are borrowing, whatever term they are adopting, because they do not seem to have a reputation for transparency and accountability.
Right. Now, I can't speak to the reputation, and I think a lot of that is a matter of how you view certain things, right? But let me speak to the concept of accountability, and let me speak to the concerns raised by Union of Pensioners. And by the way, when we speak about pension funds, I like to also believe that my pension is there, as is your pension. So let's not speak to it as if it's an abstract concept of some people we don't know. It's our money, all of us. So let me speak to accountability and transparency. It is something that, for us at the NSIA, is the number one pillar of how we operate. We publish our accounts, it's audited. Investment processes go through a board approval process, but they also go through processes that can be truly interrogated. So we will bring the same level of accountability and transparency in the investments of these projects. Here's what will happen. We develop a project, and it is sponsored through an investment bank, as is normally the case, with an audit firm behind it and all sorts of smart people working around it. And it's presented to your pension fund manager, who will then choose whether to invest or not to invest. So the process will just be as transparent and as accountable as most of the other things that the NSIA will invest in. So let's establish that. The second thing we need to establish is the way pension funds work. I have not managed one, but I've worked with so many of them in my previous career and even more recently. We set up InfraCredit. It was an idea of the NSIA, and we professionalized it. That is actually something that provides a guarantee structure around some of the infrastructure investments that pension funds are investing in today, right? And that structure is to ensure that the projects are scrubbed and made sure that they can work. And then you must have faith in your pension fund manager to make the right decisions for you. Otherwise, you're not giving them your money. Thirdly, the way you invest in pension funds is you have many people contributing. Some people are 10 years away from retirement. Some are 20 years away. Some are 30 years away from retirement. Some are 40 years away from retirement. You know what the retirement profile of your funds are. You know when you need to start providing them back to pensioners. You now choose projects based on the tenure of the funds that you have. So you will invest a 10-year money or 5-year money or 20-year money depending on the way it works. Now, all over the world, this is how it works. And people hopefully will continue to work hard and create jobs in the country. That, I think, is the most challenging issue we have to deal with. But the more jobs you create, the more people join the contributory pension scheme, the more funds are available, the more these things are actually going to work for the project. So I need you to understand that the role of governors is largely also because all these infrastructure projects we are talking about are not in the sky. They are all within the states. So you really have to engage with the people around whom you need their either their approval or their endorsement or their support or some kind of protection to actually make the infrastructure work. So it's investing in infrastructure is public-private partnerships all over the world. You have to deal with government, you have to deal with states, you have to deal with federal government, you have to deal with pensioners, you have to deal with sovereign wealth fund in our case, or any other investor who wants to be part of it.
Well, I completely agree with Rufai that infra credit, that your answer that you gave to my question was also music to my ears. But I also want you to address that according to the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, Nigeria needs $3 trillion a year to bridge our infrastructure deficit. How is that going to be accomplished?
First of all, I don't think it's $3 trillion a year. That is not even spent by the United States, right? So,
sorry, it's over the next 30 years. I'm completely distracted. Over the next 30 years, $3 trillion.
No, it's not your fault.
Thank you.
That's fine. Yes, sure. Yes, that's what we need. That's what the Economic Sustainability Plan says. The reality is it's difficult. So let's start with that. But is that what we need? Yes. Do we have that? No. Are we going to get all of that? Maybe not. So we need to prioritize. Okay, we need to prioritize. What will not be right is to allow assets that have economic potential to waste. Okay, so tolling of these projects is important. Turning them to useful economic corridors are important, so we must do that. The second thing that needs to be avoided is to allow assets in general to lie idle. There's a piece of research a while ago that I found very fascinating, and that research was by PricewaterhouseCoopers, where it said, and it was published on Business Day, where it said that Nigeria has $900 billion of dead assets, like assets that are just allowed to waste. That's true on completion of those assets or assets that have just been abandoned. You know, they've been completed, but nobody's monetizing them. Honestly, I think the biggest challenge today of this country, in my view, from an investor standpoint, is turning some of those assets into investable assets. That's part of the work we're going to do through the NIA, through the InfraCo, through all of these vehicles. The important thing is, look, all these vehicles, we are all on the same side. We identify the fact that we all have to solve one problem. Turn assets that are not today being utilized properly into economically viable assets. Address the key challenges. Everybody needs to pitch in. The government does not have the money at all to address this. It doesn't. And more importantly, when it's built, how do you maintain them, right? So I agree, $3 trillion is a number I can't even begin to fathom. But what I can deal with is sitting down and saying, listen, we finished Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. We're going to put tolls. We're going to turn the economic corridor. Let me talk about the economic corridor for a minute. From the median, which is the center of the road, everything 45 meters on either side belongs to the concessionaire. These are all economic opportunities. Why do we have trailers parked in Ogere? I was there again 3 weeks ago. There's a trailer park there, operationalize it, move them there, they pay for it. Okay? Why is the load lying idle when we can turn them into agriculture concessions? Again, these are assets that the PIDF concessionaire already owns, that's managed by the NSIA. So this is what we plan to do. These things have to be turned into economic opportunities. That, I think, is how you start, one by one, to solve all these issues. So that's how I feel it's going to work.
And by the way, the U.S. did spend $3 trillion in the first 10 months of fiscal 2020. Slight correction there.
For COVID, yes. All right, so I want to move on. You said two things that like music. You've been saying a lot of things that are music to my ears today. You talked about the PwC report. I know about that report. In fact, my friend Andrew Nevin, Dr. Andrew Nevin, did put that report out there. And the word is about dead capital. How can you turn dead capital around? 900 billion in dead capital. Well, when you talk about dead capital, you also have to talk about property rights and things like that. But we know how it's been like in this country. Correct. We also have to talk about things like rights of way. But we know how it's been like in this country. So how do you rejig all of that? That's one. Secondly, I did ask about, progress reports on the second Niger Bridge, if you can tell us about that. Thirdly, you would agree with me on this, that the trust deficit is a big problem in all of this. I'm happy you said a lot of things that are music to my ears today anyway. I'm happy you talked about the concessionaire and concessionee debacle.
But how will people trust you in all of these things when we had a concession deal a couple of years ago with Courtney? We didn't see anything until we started getting violence by the federal government to still fix this road, and it went on and on. You know the song and dance about this. You know it. So why should people with their pension funds trust you on this? Even if gestation period is another problem, you've tackled that very rightly. Why should they trust you?
Well, I manage the NSIA, and I think the NSIA has earned some rights to be trusted. And it's reflected in the fact that the NSIA has always been ranked top quartile for transparency and accountability by the Sovereign Wealth Fund Institute. We come here, you look at our accounts, everything is audited to the spot. So I think as a manager of the Sovereign Wealth Fund, I think there's no trust deficit. I will hope there isn't, because that's something we spend a lot of time on. So that's number one. Number two, there's a whole bunch of questions packed in there, so I actually missed the very first one.
Number two is the second Niger Bridge, and number three will be debt capital.
So let me deal with second Niger. Yes, thank you very much. So I'll come back to that. But let's even deal with the trust deficit issue. And my father was a pensioner, and he's late now, but I know the challenges he's faced with his pension. So we all have one story or another about how this has been poorly managed in the past. So that's true. It's not something that anybody can deny. But we also know that there was a Pension Reform Act that was passed something in about 15 years ago, which has changed the way that system works. So today, your pensions are no longer managed by government, they're managed by private sector. That has changed the entire system. And I think the people behind that need to be given a lot of credit. I remember Governor NSIA Rufai, Chinelo Anahuamazu, all these people worked on it. And that has changed the entire pension structure today. So these things can be fixed, okay? And they have to be fixed systematically. So pensions as a concept has been fixed. Now, investments of pensions are now in the hands of managers that you as a pensioner appointed and you trust. Now it's easy. If you don't like them, you fire them. The returns are not good, you fire them, move your money elsewhere, right? So you need to trust those people to invest your money properly. So the trust issue isn't so much about the government. The trust issue is about who manages your money. So that's point number one. Point number two, there are laws around concessions, and there are expected performances on both sides from the concessionaire and the person who is actually managing, who owns the assets. I don't know what happened in the Courtney case. I have an idea. I've read about it, but I wasn't part of it. But the reality is sometimes you need to probe as to why things fail and ensure that you understand the full picture. Did the concessionaire fulfill all his mandate? Did the government fulfill all his mandates? Whatever the issue is, I think there's a legal redress process that should be observed. And I don't know enough about this to speak. But I think the truth about it is that all of these things are governed by rules, and people need to enforce those rules. In our case, we insist, even though the NSI is owned by government, it's run with a private sector philosophy, and everything we do with government is governed by contracts. And we all hire good lawyers on both sides to ensure that it is done properly, because the NSIA, by its act, is supposed to act independently. So when we deal with government, we ensure that all the boxes are ticked before we make an investment. So I'd like to believe that that deals with the trust deficit issues. But again, these things are all about implementation. And so far, 8 years at the NSIA, I think we have actually shown that we have been able to achieve this. We've run it for coming up to 8 years, and every single month of the last 8 years, we've not lost any money. So we've actually been very, very profitable as an organization. So I think people need to be able to be comfortable with that. Now, the issue of second Niger Bridge, I was on the bridge 3-4 weeks ago, and it's going. It's going. I think we're currently on the current phase of the project, about 50% done. For many years, when I come to this program, I keep getting asked what's happening, what's going on, the project is not happening. I said it is happening. But then suddenly now you can drive there, you can actually see that the one side of the bridge has been decked. The second side will start being decked early next year. It's still on track for completion in 2022. So that is all I can say on the second Niger Bridge, so it's moving. On the issue of debt capital, yes, I don't know that number for a fact, but I trust PricewaterhouseCoopers, and the number doesn't sound Doesn't sound strange to me. And there are many things being done to address it. So I sit on a committee that is looking at restructuring the Ministry of Finance Incorporated. The Ministry of Finance Incorporated owns most of these assets. The Ministry of Finance Incorporated is a passive custodian of these assets, but it's not an active investor. It's not an active manager of the assets. So we're working very hard to actually make sure that these assets are not allowed to waste. And it's everything from land and buildings to rail tracks to roads, right of way, tangible and intangible assets. All of these need to be brought to a balance sheet for accountability, for management, for measuring of performance. Let me tell you, countries of the world have done this successfully. Singapore took all their assets owned, created a sovereign wealth fund out of them. It's called Temasek. Temasek went from 300 million Singaporean dollars to now over 77 billion Singaporean dollars by actively managing their assets properly. This is what we need to do as a country. You cannot build a road and walk away. It needs to be made economically viable. That's how you maintain it. So these are the things we're hoping to achieve. I don't have the big picture of tackling $900 billion or $3 trillion. That's all fantastic. But let me take my job one step at a time and deal with the assets in front of me. Let's make these roads work, and then we can show an example of how these things can work in other assets.
Well, I'm sure you understand where we're coming from. When each time we have this conversation with you, we talk about the second Niger Bridge. It's probably the most visible, most important federal government project in that part of the country. And when the president was presenting the 2021 budget at the National Assembly, he talked about it. And he said he was certain that it would be ready by 2023. You just mentioned 2022. And that project has been there since 2015. From your assessment, you say you just visited that part of the country. Do you have any, can you give us concrete assurance that, in fact, that second Niger Bridge will be ready before 2023? That's one. Two, what about the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway? One side of it seems to be moving faster than the other side. What is the guarantee that that also will be ready and will not continue until maybe 2027? And then there is the Abuja-Kano Road. If you could just talk about these projects in greater detail, since they form major aspects of your intervention with regard to infrastructure.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for the question. So these projects are covered under something called the Presidential Infrastructure Development Fund, which is managed by the NSIA. Okay? And the idea behind creating the PIDF, the Presidential Infrastructure Development Fund, is to look for a public-private partnership arrangement to fund and commercialize these projects and avoid the perennial challenge of projects never being completed because of funding issues. So part of our job, and our job mainly on this, is to ensure that the projects are rightly structured, and they are funded. So you're going to see us come to the market next year to raise capital, issue bonds, and people will fund them. A bit like the Sukuk that you talked about. We'll also be issuing some part of the funding as Sukuk to address these projects. Now, Second Niger Bridge, there are three parts to the Second Niger Bridge project. The first part is a 10.7 kilometer road, bridge and approach road, right? 10.7 kilometers. That's the part that the NSIA was tasked with. There is also the access roads, another in total 33 kilometers of access road that was supposed to be handled by the Ministry of Works. So recently, the NSIA has been asked to look at how to structure and fund that as well. So that's just a recent addition to the work scope of the NSIA. But let me speak to the original work scope, which is a 10.7 kilometer bridge and approach road. That is on track. I believe so far, apart from the few months we lost due to COVID, we are on track to finish that before the end of 2022. The additional access road, which was just added to our scope, we will come back to you as to the timing of that, because that is something we're just beginning to get our heads around. So when the president spoke about 2023, my sense is that that is actually correct, because from what I see today, I don't see any reason to doubt that at least the original scope of the work will be completed before the end of 2022. Like I said, the decking of the bridge is tedious, it's long, but the pillars are the hardest work, and that is what took us a long time. By the way, let me correct you. The second Niger Bridge has been in concept stage since over 40 years. I started hearing about this thing when I was in primary school. Okay, so it's not since 2015. It's been long before that. And it's only gained some real momentum in 2018 when the PIDF was launched by the president, and that is what is giving it impetus. And if you drive there, go to that side, you will see that there's actually a bridge. I'm an engineer by training, so I don't want to get lost in the technical details. But I just want to give you one snippet. Each of those pillars you see from the seabed run 18 stories deep. It takes a long time to put that together. So when for almost 2 years people said, what's going on? I said, it's going on. So but now you can see it. You drive there, you'll see a bridge in the works. So 2 years from now, we'll see. But I'm very comfortable that by 2022, we will be able to finish at least the phase of the work. Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, timing is also for completion by the end of 2022. That, again, we've lost some time with COVID. Let's hope there's no further disruptions in the future, but work is ongoing. And I'm hoping that you will start to see a phased handover of some of these projects. Please, I would like to say that the work that is going on, obviously, at the moment is causing all sorts of disruptions. But, you know, if you go on that road, you have very limited diversion possibilities. So this is going to remain a challenge. I drove on that road. I know the difficulty. And I have a team there. We go there almost every month to see what's going on. So I think that from what I see so far, it's going. And 2022 remains a completion date. Abuja-Kano Road, scope has changed dramatically. There's a lot that is going on there. The Ministry of Works, who are the clients and our partners on this, will provide more detail. But my sense is that, you know, the work, I drove the Kano to Zaria to Kaduna end, again, a few weeks ago, and work is ongoing. Where there's a challenge is Abuja to Kaduna end, but I believe the Ministry of Works will be soon giving you a real scope of how that will accelerate. So that's the way we work. We are the financiers, we're the funders. The Ministry of Works are partners who are actually the owners of the project. So some of the technical details will be better provided by the Minister of Works.
Well, thank you for that. And in desperately seeking some kind of a silver lining in view of the recent appalling headlines about the Zaba Mari massacre and the prospect of impending famine, as has been stated by the United Nations in the north of Nigeria, I want you to talk about the Presidential Fertilizer Initiative that's targeting 5 million smallholder farmers.
Okay. And again, to the deaths that happened in Borno State, is very sad, and may their souls rest in peace. It's a little bit difficult sometimes to stomach these things when you read about them, and it's a tragedy. But I will speak to the PFI, which you know was also a program designed by the NSIA, on the authority of the president to help bring the cost of fertilizer down. This was done we initiated this program end of 2016, but the real implementation started in January 2017. The PFI was designed at a time because fertilizer was very expensive. Fertilizer, the quality was a little bit suspect, and it was causing all kinds of issues for the system. It's always been a problem in Nigeria. If you've ever lived in Nigeria, there's always, almost every year when there's a problem with fertilizer. So what we did with the PFI was very simple. We sat down and said, look, we're going to intervene for 3 years only. In 3 years, we'll restructure the program, restructure the industry, and put them on the path to sustainability, and we will start to exit as NSIA. And we've done that. We've accomplished the following in the last 3 years. Number one, when we started, there were less than 4 blending plants in operation. Today, there are 40 blending plants in operation locally. When we started, the cost of fertilizer was 11,000 to 13,000 naira for a bag of NPK 2010-10 fertilizer. Within a year of the PFI starting, the price collapsed to 5,000 naira. When we started, hardly anybody was employed in this business. According to the Fertilizer Association, more than 50,000 people were employed within the first year. So this is impact. The NSIA did not do this to make any money. We hardly made any money doing this. We didn't lose money either. We made sure the government refunded us if there was ever a deficit. That's the agreement between NSIA and the government. And we were open book with them. The president entered into agreement with Morocco, with Russia to supply some key raw materials, which we then transported, got the blenders to blend for us, open book, transparent costing. We had a recommended price, and that was sold to the farmers. I would think this was very successful because between the start of the program in 2017 and 2020, we were able to blend and deliver 20 million bags of 50 kg NPK 2010-10 at that reduced price. I think, and even if you don't tell me, I'll tell myself, I think it was a successful program. Now, where are we now? 3 years is expired. We actually went an extra year, which is 4 years. We are now pulling back and turning the industry to be more sustainable. There are 40 of them now. They can carry their own load, and the NSIA is now going to be more of a bulk supplier of raw materials. That was the recent agreement entered between the presidency and the NSIA. So you're going to see the pressure and the intervention of the NSIA reduced dramatically. The industry now needs to run by itself. The 5 million farmers being targeted for the small stakeholder farmers is a program being designed by the Ministry of Agric. They gave some details, and I'll prefer you speak to them about how that works. I don't know the details. The NSI is not involved in downstream distribution. We're only involved in upstream production, importation of raw materials, and making the domestic blending plants work. But again, like I even said, this year, the industry is now taking charge of their own destiny, and the NSI is beginning to reduce its involvement. So that 5 million is something that I think you speak to Ministry of Agric. I don't have any insight as to what is happening with the potential for farming. But what I know about Nigeria is most times the headlines don't always, especially when the headline is done internationally, it doesn't always reflect the reality. And I'm hoping in this case, it doesn't reflect the reality, because a famine will be a disaster for us, given all the work that has been done for fertilizer. But it's not just about the farmers. It's also about the fact that we have had flooding. These are all facts of the matter that people need to remember. And so, again, this is now going outside of my comfort zone. Speak to Minister of Agric about that. I don't know enough about this to speak.
Okay, I mean, good job there, but I'm sort of like an Oliver Twist. Bravo, pat on the back, sort of like an Oliver Twist. I'll also look forward to, apart from, providing nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium fertilizers in different blends, which is quite good for the farmers. I'll also look forward to sort of like a national silo project where we can store this food when this is also produced, because that's also a big, post-harvest losses are really on the increase in Nigeria. Maybe something you can put as part of your outlook, for 2021. What will be your investment outlook like in 2021? And also some interventions in health you have, I think cancer centers and the like. If you could just talk me through all of that.
Sure. All right, how much time do you have? Because that's a lot to talk through. But let me speak to the following 3 things. Agriculture, we have made the following investments in agriculture. The first investment we made was a fund for agriculture finance alongside KFW and the Ministry of Agric. Is managed by Sahel Capital. They're playing an active role in helping farmers become more commercially viable. The second investment we made was a co-investment fund designed with a company called UFF, which is a Dutch South African company. We've invested in primary production of grains and feed mills, and we're also now rolling that across the country. So next year, you're going to see us active in Kaduna State, in addition to Nasarawa project that we have, in Kaduna, in Edo, possibly between Abia and Ebonyi. These are places we're looking at being active in. And also any other state that is open to us, Oyo and Akwa Ibom. These are all places where we have real prospects on the ground. So expect to see the UFF NSIA partnership get more active in agriculture. You spoke about silos. Silos is not something we have looked at investing in. I'm sure it's an investable sector, but we have not. But we looked at working with the AFDB on special agri-processing zones. It's still in the drawing board. Again, I tend not to like to talk about things that are still futuristic. Our mantra at NSI is show and tell, so it's actually when it's done that we talk about it. But since you asked, these are things we're going to be focused on next year. Finally, for the fertilizer, we are moving more upstream. I told you 2 years ago that the NSIA and OCP have partnered into building a basic chemical platform to produce ammonia that is used for diammonium phosphate and urea. That project is ongoing. Preparation for such projects take time. It's $1.2 billion, and that is ongoing. So in agriculture, these are the things you're going to see us doing. We are going to be at the confluence of agriculture and industrials. This is what you'll see. Healthcare. Healthcare is going to be very active for us. 2019 and 2020 were years of commercializing our 3 healthcare projects. The cancer center within Luth is operational, running very well, yet to turn a profit, but it's on track to do so. The radiology diagnostic centers in Kano and Umuahia are also operational, and those are fast on track to become very profitable. Now, having paid our quote-unquote tuition fees to learn how this works, we are now going to roll out big time. So there's a project that has started in Abuja. We call it the Center for Advanced Medicine. That is ongoing. We are also partnered with University College London to design a pharmaceutical investment intervention. One of the things that we knew was going to happen, and it was scary to see it happen in real life, was the shortages in pharmaceutical products during COVID. Basic things like high blood pressure medicine, HIV medicine, all of these things can be made locally. And so we are working very hard with UCL as our consultant, University College London Pharmaceutical Department as our consultants. You're going to see us roll something out next year. This is going to be very, very big for us. And then we are going to roll out a few more of the radiology and diagnostic centers in other parts of the country. So very active in healthcare. And frankly, let me speak to the Luth Cancer Center. It's a flagship project that we are very, very proud of. We're able to deliver the best radiotherapy and chemotherapy at less than 1/4 of the price you pay if you went to Ghana or went to Dubai. And the equipment we have is superior. And I've seen the one in Ghana. Equipment we have is superior. And the people we have are in many ways world class. Because medicine is one area that Nigeria has competitive advantage in. I used to live in New York. If you saw a black doctor in New York or California, places where I worked, also, it is most likely 6 out of 10 of them are Nigerians. Many of them trained locally, Unilab, Uniben, Uniport, so they're all working in these places. Create an atmosphere for them to come back and deliver those services. So we will do that because I believe in healthcare, we plan to become not just a place where we reverse medical tourism, but a place people come to for medical tourism. So we're going to be very active there. The other areas where you're going to see us very active next year is something called, and it was just approved by our board, we're yet to fully announce how it's going to work, but it's an innovation fund. The NSIA Nigeria Innovation Fund is going to be rolled out next year. And this is about the NSIA now working with some of the people who are very innovative, be it in IT, be it in industrial technology, be it in biotech. These are areas you're going to see us become very active through both direct investments and indirect through funds. We started investing in venture capital last year. With a few investments closed this year in venture capital, we're now going one step further to now look at investing in these areas. And I just watch the space because there's exciting stuff in the pipeline that I'll be invested in. Next year, I don't know. We're in a business where the market tends to determine what the outlook is for us. But I know one thing. We have a very risk-minded asset allocation structure. I know next year will still be as profitable for us. But I don't know whether it's going to be like this year. One of the things as an investor you learn to tell people is that past performance is not an indication of the future. But I'm hoping that at least gives us enough base to walk into next year. So I could sit here and announce all the programs that are coming out of the NSIA, but that's going to take too long. But over time, we will speak to all these infrastructure projects, the new funds that we're launching, that I believe will all play a very important role in the lives of people.
Well, I would have loved to ask you a question about the East-West Highway. Sections 1 to 4, which we're supporting with about 20 billion. The contractors, we're told, are not yet there on the side, but we don't have enough time. Maybe when next you are here, we'll talk about the East-West Highway, which is of interest to a lot of people in the Niger Delta.
We are no longer involved in the East-West Road. Okay. It's been taken from us and handed to the Ministry of Niger Delta Affairs, so there's nothing to discuss.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining us on the morning show. Uche Orji, CEO, Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority.